Good evening. One of my subscribers asked a great question about D rates. They were having SCR system defaults on a 2350. We haven't talked about that platform yet, but it's similar to the 2250, which we're just starting into. So they had some faults in the SCR system, and they asked what they could expect as far as the D rates, as the amount of D rate and the progression. So we're going to take a look tonight at the MIL light, and that's the yellow outline of the engine that comes on. There's no wrench in it. It's not a solid filled light. It's usually just an outline of an engine, and you'll see a picture on the slide I'm going to show of it. So let's get going and talk about the MIL light and what it means. One of the big areas of confusion that a lot of our drivers have is knowing the difference between the MIL and the check engine light. So on the left, you see the check engine lights. Over on the right is the MIL. Notice the MIL is a hollowed out engine with nothing inside of it. It can also be just the letters MIL. A check engine light always either says check or has a wrench in it or a lightning bolt, or it says check engine, or it's a yellow square. Now let's take a look at the logic of the MIL light and what it does. Okay, let's look at the numbers 1 through 8 at the top of the vertical bars. Each segment there, and I've got purple lines going to the segments, each segment represents 4 hours. Now you've got a green bar on the bottom going across. When that bar is green, that represents no check engine light, no active faults. When that bar turns red and jumps up, that's representing that the fault lamp has come on and you've got an active fault condition. If the fault condition affects emissions at all, so it could be an injector, turbo, pressure sensor, EGR faults, anything that affects emissions, the MIL light's going to come on. The MIL light is the onboard diagnostic system, and its job is to make sure that you don't drive continually without addressing faults that cause elevated emissions. So our fault is active for about, let's say, 7 hours there. We've got an hour left in the 1 to 2 block. And remember, there's 4 hours in each one of these blocks. And 4 hours is significant because the MIL light have to see 3 4-hour blocks with no faults active before it resets itself and forgets the D-rate strategy and starts over. Its job is to monitor the D-rate strategy, and let's say that we're 6 hours into the fault being active. You would be at a 40% torque D-rate by then. But then suddenly the fault goes inactive. You immediately have full horsepower restored, full torque restored. But you drive for 2 hours and the light comes on again. You're going to go right back to that 40% D-rate because the MIL light is remembering where you were in that D-rate schedule. That's what it does. Once you make it 3 trips, and a trip in this arena is 4 hours, once you make it 3 trips with no faults going active that affect emissions, the MIL light will reset. It resets the D-rate schedule, and if a fault went active right after that, it would not derate the engine until you got to the first D-rate, which is about an hour of driving with the fault light on. I will talk about D-rate schedules in a coming video. So I hope that this helped you to understand why that MIL light stays on when the fault light goes off. That light, the MIL light, does not mean you have an active fault. It means the onboard diagnostics are watching. And above you can read there, an operational cycle is is defined as a trip that meets any of the following conditions. Basically, it's 4 hours. And if you drive an hour, shut it off for 2 hours, and drive an hour, that's a 4-hour trip, because when the engine's off, the ECM is still awake and the internal clock is still running. And because the MIL system was involved, it's logging time. So the good news about that is you can be parked with the engine off and finish a 4-hour trip before you start the next one, so you kind of get a jump on your MIL clearing itself. Okay, if you have any questions, ask them. I hope that was fairly clear, and we're going to talk about D-rate schedules soon. Thanks for joining me.